Thank you. Welcome to the meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for the public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Please remember your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting. Other attendees are permitted to film and photograph and record the meeting, provided it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. None. Ensure the recording quality is maintained. Could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that the mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Welcome to all those in attendance. Can I ask now Mrs. Gibbons to introduce all the officers?
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Kelly Gibbons. I'm the Development Manager leading today. To my right is Gemma Webster, who will be introduced, will be presenting item 6, and then later we'll be joined by Chloe Smart with item 7, Josh Evans, item 8, and Jack Dyer, item 9. And online we have Mark Sorrentino as the Council's Legal Advisor and Katie Jones from the Local Highway Authority.
Okay. We move on to item 1, apologies for absence. We have apologies for absence of councillors Andrews, Alter and Toynbee, plus Powell. Can I now move on to name substitute? Councillor Stark is acting as substitute for Councillor Andrews. Declarations of interest. Please indicate if you wish to declare an interest, and I will call each councillor individually. There are no declarations of interest. And we move on to item 4, confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of September 2023. Are the minutes of the meeting subject to approval? Outlined, please. Please can any member raise their hands if they were present at that meeting and in support of it being deemed correct. Any abstentions? I believe you're one abstention, yes, nobody against. Right, we'll now move on. I've got no chairman's announcement. We'll now move on to item 6, which is 6. The officer, can I request that the speakers in present for the agenda 6, Mr. Saunders and Mr. Tompkins, please take their seat in the public gallery, please. Right, the application before us concerns Treduch Farm, Glengrove, Ross-on-Wye. Can I now ask the officer to make the presentation, Ms. Webster?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Thank you for your time on site yesterday. There are no updates for this application. This full planning application under consideration is in relation to the farmstead at Treduch Farm to the northwest of the village of Glengrove. This application has been redirected to the Planning Committee by Councillor Swinglehurst, the local ward member, due to public interest in the form of objections to the proposal. The site lies to the east of the Langowan to Welsh Newton Road and south of the Langgrove Road junction, and it is within the parish of Langowan. It is within the Langowan neighbourhood area and which has a made NDP, and the policies within have full weight. Next slide, please. The site comprises a number of agricultural buildings, both traditional and modern. The existing farmhouse is to the east of the site, but does not form part of this application. The site has 3 existing accesses to the highway network. The first access is via the U71224 Langrove Road, just 10 metres from the junction. with the C1248, which is a Llangorren to Welsh Newton Road. The other two accesses are via the Llangorren to Welsh Newton Road. One is 20 metres from the junction with the Langrove Road, and the other 60 metres from the junction. The topography of the site rises from the north to the south. The site is not subject to any landscape designations, but is rural in nature and surrounded by agricultural land, and is considered to be open countryside in planning policy terms, as it is outside of the defined settlement boundary for Lang Road. There are no listed buildings nearby. However, the range of traditional barns and associated farmhouse are considered to be of sufficient historic interest and value to represent non-designated heritage assets. The proposal is twofold. Firstly, the conversion of the courtyard of existing stone barns into 4 dwellings, and secondly, the removal of the existing modern steel frame barn and replacement with 4 new dwellings in a courtyard layout. The proposal also includes the demolition of all other modern structures at the site, the rearrangement of site accesses, the creation of an orchard on the southern end of the site, wider, soft and hard landscaping proposals, the installation of slopeways, and the creation of a new footpath from the site to the village. Next slide, please. This slide shows the existing site plan with the stone barns around the courtyard to the north of the site and the farmhouse to the northeast of the courtyard. The model farm buildings are located to the south of the stone barns and have been added ad hoc to the farm over a number of years. Next slide, please. This photograph shows the existing site looking southeast towards the farmhouse. The stone barns are at the centre and to the left of the photograph, and the modern barns are to the right. Next slide, please. The layout of the proposal will maintain the existing 3-sided courtyard with stone barns facing towards the farmhouse. In addition, there are 2 smaller barns, one running alongside the boundary with the Langrove Road and one to the southern side of the farmhouse. The converted barns will be plots 5 to 8. The replacement of the modern barns with new dwellings will be plots 1 to 4. As can be seen on the site plan, these will also be arranged in a 3-sided courtyard to face out towards the road. There are 2 detached properties on either side and a semi-detached property running north to south along the back. There is an extant Class Q permission on the site for the conversion of the modern agricultural buildings to 4 dwellings. This is considered by officers to be a genuine fallback position. The 4 barn conversions would utilise the existing access adjacent to the junction of the Langrove Road to Llangorren Road. The existing access from the Welsh Newton to Llangorren Road would be closed up, and a new access approximately 90 metres from the junction would be provided for access to the new build park. Space for the parking of at least 2 vehicles will be provided to the front of each property, along with guaranteed and secure cycle parking. The Highways Engineer has reviewed the information submitted and has no objections to the proposal. Following additional information and amended plans, including ensuring that the boundary to the south of the junction, plot 6, is kept as open post and rail to allow for improved visibility at the access and the junction. There will be ecological benefits provided as part of the scheme in the form of a new orchard planted within the southwest corner of the site and additional soft landscaping, as well as biodiversity enhancements detailed within the ecology report. The Council's ecologist has no objections to the proposal subject to conditions. Landscape have no objections and feel the scheme will complement the existing buildings and that the proposed landscaping will enhance landscape amenity and consolidate gaps in the existing condition. It is not considered that the proposal will give rise to harm from a heritage point. Amended plans to the barns and site layout have overcome initial concerns from the historic building officers. And whilst there is a change of appearance to the area, given its existing commercial use, this is not considered to be harmful in this instance. No objections are raised from the Council's historic building manager. Drainage is proposed through the mains utilising a pump system. Welsh Water have no objection to the additional discharge nor pump system. A habitats regulation assessment has been undertaken on the proposed drainage and has concluded that there will be no adverse impact on the Riverwide Sap. Natural England has been consulted and submitted no objections to the conclusions of the HRA. Hard surfacing will be changed to permeable with an attenuation tank and rainwater harvesting to improve the overall surface water drainage across the site. There are no objections raised from the landowner in respect to the proposed drainage. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed elevations of plot 1, which will be this property is the 4-bedroom and is the southernmost building on the site and runs on an east to west axis. The materials proposed are vertical timber cladding in a grey satin finish under a corrugated metal sheet roof. Part of the ground floor will be of rubble stone to match the traditional barns. A double garage is attached to the northwest elevation. Next slide, please. This slide shows the elevations of plots 2 and 3, the semi-detached new dwellings that are the eastern side of the new buildings. Dwellings are both 3-bedroom properties, single garage and main village. Materials that will be the same as plot 1. Next slide, please. This slide shows the elevations of plot 1. It's a mirror image of plot 1 across the board, so 4-bedroom. Next slide, please. This slide shows the southeast elevation of plots 5 and 6, which form part of the conversion of the traditional stone barns. These 2 plots will be the larger barn known as the children. 5 will be a 4 bedroom, 6 will be a 3 bedroom. Next slide, please. This is the proposed northwest elevation at south elevation of plot 5 and 6, which show the existing openings being maintained in the resource and next slide. This is a section of the northeast elevation and also the shape of the which will be and cycle and bin storage and small openings facing to the west. Next slide, please. This slide shows plot 7, which is a 3 bedroom village situated site running along the boundary of the road. Materials were made of rubber stone and next slide, please. Plot 8 is a 2 bedroom property located to the south of the barns, adjacent to the east of the road. Proposal review has considered emphasizing the efficiency of certain needs. Each building's orientation is appropriate for passive solar gain. The building fabrics will deliver high standards of thermal insulation and thermal maps which will reduce energy consumption and maintenance. Running will include air source heat plant and improvement systems. Saving measures to include aerated low-flow taps and shutters. Limited to 110 litres per. To be able to provide evidentiary. Slide 30. Next slide, please. This photograph is looking south along the line down to Washington Road, showing the traditional stone barns to the left, which is safely converted into plot land. And the modern wooden frame building with Dutch barn to be removed. The existing access that can be seen is all closed off and moved further south, and the native hedgerow planted in the base of the existing masters. There will be a new orchard planted and a new barn buildings to the south. Next please. This is a photograph of the traditional fire buildings. Next slide, please. This map provides a detailed view of the connected path that will allow the residents and proposals and steep access directly to the village to reduce the use of car and to ensure highway safety as it is located in the middle of the village. To conclude, the site is located outside of the street. However, the potential for 4 buildings is for the convention of traditional stone farm elements. In addition, there is an exact large accumulation of which is considered as genuine for acquisition. The continued range will replace the modern contain the local materials to be in keeping. Additional utilization of landscape and drainage is will be provided, as well as an improved energy efficiency in the fast-food scheme. There have been noted projections to the consistencies and national and national projection. Therefore, systems that are available to be incorporated and it's a recommendation that limitations subject to the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Church against the violence the addition of 4 things as well as the old actions. Size this makes it a significant for it. It's me sort of on way 3, maybe it's the application just not to display so again. It's the setting transfers of objections and conversion of the world set. Consider this to enable the control of these projects for any CPH. So for general purpose farms, based on the 4 new buildings, is a lot of council to support. The dreams at this point, they are decision to use local buildings structure of these slopes, which is conflict of our to the materials. So feeling to this occupation is the use of the trades of surveying the road, seeing for the road. Mission C was trace of personal new sexy buttons. Today, something like that. It's not a condition. It's still being considered. It's already something significant. It's concerned for fostering structure. But the basic further separation between responsibilities, the industry, as well as in this case, for education. Those policies concern the connections to local services. English room. The risk of must be clearly stated that its use is also for general. Must be fully accessible to these opportunities to the information. Lastly, English is also for the development and the impact of the local community. Consider it contractor scheme, e.g., road cleaning, natural treatment, litter picking, constructions.
None of these are mentioned.
The trade for need users. Fixing this thing is the subject. The objections of implication.
It's recorded. The officer's report. The application. This is the is a solid settlement boundary defined and approved in the Langaran NDP, and B, directly contrary to adopted policies in the MPPG and the core strategy / local plan regarding development in the open countryside. As such, the first duty of the planning office and ultimately the planning community is to ascertain that there are any exceptional circumstances that would justify mission contrary to adopted policies. Residents of Langrove, supported by their elected members, believe there is no such justification, and the officer's report fails to justify a conclusion recommending the grant of planning permission. That a prior approval exists under Class Q for the conversion of relatively modern and unattractive agricultural buildings by no means justifies their demolition and replacement by modern housing. If this is the applicant's fallback position, by all means let him use it. Class Q is not to be used as an open door for development which is contrary to national, district and local policy. The current application is to be considered on its merits and in the context of those policies. The policies clearly indicate that the application should be refused. Langrove is not a sustainable location. It is served by substandard single-track unclassified roads and is lacking in basic facilities such as footpaths, street lighting, local shops and surgeries. It has no bus service to speak of, and all transactions into and out of the village, including the school, are only achieved by the use of private motors. The local sewage network is at capacity, and as witnessed by recent overflow to the detriment of the local nature reserve, nearby homes and watercourses, which in turn impact of the SSI and the River Wye. Notwithstanding its unsustainability, Langrove has accepted more new dwellings that has been required of the village and has met all reasonable targets within the accepted constraints and boundaries set by the Neighbourhood Development Plan. Residents of Langrove believe that enough is enough, and that to permit new housing contrary to all reasonable and adopted policy could only be justified by very exceptional circumstances that do not exist in this instance. The suggestion in the conclusion to the officer's report that this is sustainable development is wholly refuted by the residents of the village, who already know their location within the village envelope could be unsustainable by any reasonable standards. New dwellings in the open countryside, contrary to policy at all levels, is not sustainable. A permissible footpath out of sight and unusable in the dark does not make the development sustainable. The suggestion that 4 new houses would be more attractive than 4 Class Q conversions may be true, though it is only a subjective judgment, but to accept this as exceptional circumstances in effect be to see the Planning and Regulatory Committee succumbing to a form of developer blackmail on the basis that this would be a lease works option.
Thank you. Can I just remind members, I think the online are having some difficulty with the sound. Use your microphones or speak quite closely into them so that those people online can hear. Can I now invite Mr. Tompkins, the applicant, on behalf of the applicant, to speak in support of the application. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant, Henry Biggs, whose family have long-established connections with the site and village. Mr. Biggs' grandfather purchased Rudutton Farm in the late 19th century, and the family have farmed here since. Mr. Biggs has an affinity with the village and would not wish the loss of any of its character. Indeed, his strong belief is that the proposals deliver significant respect. Proposals concern the erection of 8 dwellings in 2 quite different parts. The first part is on the north part of the site, served by an existing access of Little Druid. It comprises the conversion of the traditional stone farms to dwellings. Buildings are no longer fit for agricultural purposes as they cannot accommodate or be adapted to accommodate modern farm vehicles and implements. Both development would find a viable use for the buildings. The design is led by the character of the existing buildings, with proposed spaces designed around the building's openings and partitions. It includes the sympathetic restoration of stonework and roof coverings. This will results in a high-quality conversion scheme which will retain the agrarian character of the non-designated heritage assets. The second part of the application is on the south part of the site and served by new access for P1248. It concerns the erection of 4 new-built dwellings in place of a range of very large modern agricultural buildings. Importantly, the modern agricultural buildings already benefit from permission to be converted to 4 dwellings. This is the fallback position. Therefore, and regardless of the outcome of the application, there will be 4 dwellings on this part of the site. Those 4 dwellings will either be as per the existing permission and contained within the modern agricultural buildings, or, if this application succeeds, in the proposed new build dwellings. Planning law states that an application should succeed when the environmental impacts of the proposed scheme are better than the fallback. The applicant's case is that is the case here. The main benefit is the comparative visual impact, particularly in respect to the setting of the attractive stone barns in the wider landscape. The benefit is achieved through the proposal having a much smaller scale and more sympathetic design than the existing modern agricultural buildings, a view which is endorsed by the planning and conservation officers. Other benefits include new hedgerow, trees and an orchard, solar panels, air heat pump and electric vehicle charging points, and improved safety of access arrangements, none of which can be assured with the fallback position. Overall, it is our view that proposals come with significant planning benefits compared with the fallback position, particularly in terms of heritage, landscape, biodiversity, and climate change impacts. We hope you agree and are able to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tompkins. And now, I come to the local member, who is Councillor Snugglehurst, who speaks firstly at the beginning of the item, introduces the debate, and then at the end. She has no vote on this particular matter. Councillor Swindle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to members who attended the site visit yesterday. Rudutton Farm is very highly valued locally. It's a very lovely arrangement of traditional farm buildings. It's a real local landmark, and therefore local people care greatly about what happens on this site. Overall, there is local support for the conversion of the traditional stone buildings, as long as that conversion is carried out sensitively with care for the historic nature of this collection of buildings. And so therefore that is not where the objection lies to this application. The application also contains the removal of the modern farm buildings and replacement with new dwellings, and that is where the crux of the matter lies for local people and for the parish council, because as the applicant himself states, this is contrary to policy. Refer members to paragraph 5.1.1 in the report. NDP defines settlement boundaries for villages within the neighbourhood area, decided not within the settlement boundaries, etc., etc. So it clearly sets this element of the application as contrary to the NDP, contrary to RA3 in the core strategy. So what members today will have to consider is whether or not the fallback position, which is the existing Class Q to convert the modern farm buildings, is sufficient justification to set aside the NDP, which members will know, is a lot of work for local communities, and Langaran Parish Council put an enormous amount of effort into their NDP. It is very well thought of and is very supported by the local population. And so are they to just set that aside because of leverage being applied as a result of the Class Q permission being given on these buildings? They say no. Their belief is that the point at which the modern farm buildings are removed, anything happening subsequent to that is contrary to policy RA3, contrary to the NDP, and it's unsupportable. Mr. Saunders pointed out that as a parish, they have over-delivered in their housing supply. The NDP carries full weight, and there is therefore no reason to set it aside against local feeling in order for the application as set before you to be approved. Furthermore, in terms of talking about the local materials, I mean, even to the degree of when we talk about local stone, often we see local stone being described in the application, and what it translates into is forest blue, or even, believe it or not, Tackle Currig slate. This is not local stone. The local stone in Langaran and Mangrove is a pink sandstone, Devonian sandstone. So if we could make that abundantly clear that local stone is local, not forest blue or Tackle Currig slate. I would also like members to consider the points being made about considerate construction, and also the very good suggestion with the drainage report that attenuation ideally does not sit within crates but sits as a more natural element within the landscape for drainage. So that's really where the conundrum that you have. Local feeling says this is contrary to the NDP, it's contrary to the core strategy. That is not really, I think, a point that is argued. It's whether or not that is set aside by the Class Q that exists. The local feeling is it is not set aside. Thank you, members.
Thank you. And now I invite debate.
Councillor Baker relied on. I think Councillor Simmons got the hand up.
I'll defer to Councillor Baker. He really wants to speak first. I think it's probably, as the ward member discussed, I personally have real issues with the use of Class Q as a fallback position. I fully appreciate the work that the case officer has gone to with the applicant at providing a better proposal than the Class Q. However, I feel that we are being held to ransom with Class Q consistently, and if we allow this, there are many other barns within Herefordshire, within settlements, outside of the neighbourhood development plans that have this as a fallback position effectively. I feel that looking at those agricultural buildings, they're very large, they're very ugly. They don't sit particularly nicely with the existing farmstead and historic buildings there. I personally would like to buy one of those old barns converted with that on my doorstep, whether it be a house or not. So I'm very tempted to suggest that with it, development in open countryside, it's not in compliance with RA3, it's not in compliance with the Neighbourhood Development Plan, HOD1. I don't feel that we should be supporting the fallback position of Class Q as a reason to allow this additional development in open countryside. I fully support the reuse of the old farm buildings, RA5, with the ecological conditions that are in place. And I do appreciate, as I've said, that the board, that the case officer and the applicant have tried to make a much better site than what's currently there. However, I think that's my position. I don't really feel I can support the application with the fallback. position of Class Q as a rationale.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an interesting matter. We've got basically a development in two halves on the site. Now, the conversion of the old barns appears to have local support, and the conversion of the new barns, the old, or these new ugly metal barns, is already covered by this Class Q, which means that if this matter is refused, then Class Q will come into play and these modern barns will be converted, but not to a standard that this application would allow. And so if we allow the conversion of the old barns, which is obvious really, I mean, it's such a good use and it's well covered in policy RA3, 0.4 if you've got a copy of it. Then we come, if we do allow the conversion of the older barns, but not the conversion of the new barns, would you want to live there being overlooked by these ugly modern barns? And so it's obvious that the whole site needs to be developed as a whole. And of course, conditions will then come into play and we can decide, as Councillor Swinglehurst has said, by using local stone on the facings of these barns, sorry, the conversion of the new barns, which would hopefully cover those objections. And so it is a tricky situation, but I think overall, I don't really have a problem with supporting the officer's recommendation for approval.
Right, Councillor Thomas.
Well, I also have a problem with Part Q. Part Q should only apply to buildings that are convertible. Now, as you all know, I used to build, those are just not convertible. They would never be, you'd never be able to make those into decent houses, whichever way we look at it. So I have a problem with that, but probably not something that we can sort of refuse on. Councillor Baker's just stated what I suppose really I feel is that it would be better. Well, we've got to, if you're going to allow the conversion of the stone buildings, which I'm all for, you really got to get rid of the agricultural barns, which the only way you're going to get rid of the agricultural barns is to allow them to be replaced by more modern houses. The design of which I have to say I don't like. It doesn't fit in with the old house. It doesn't. The rake of the roofs don't fit in with the barns. I think, and also local materials. Right, there's a quarry 2 miles down the road which provides beautiful red sandstone. There's a lot more of these houses, proposed houses, could be utilising that local material. It is a very difficult one. I haven't really decided which way I'm going to go at the moment.
Okay.
So just, I think, just a point of clarity, the fallback position side of things, this isn't new to us. This is something we've been grappling with for some time, as you can imagine. I was just trying to refer back to an appeal that was 2019, I think. So it's not something that's, as I said, new to planning officers who are with that situation. And I think equally we're as uncomfortable with that sometimes as you are now. The appeal situation was referred back to some of the case law and other things, and again said that it is, if it's a genuine fallback position, then we do have to give it weight. What the inspector did in that case, which is one in Linton in Moss, was essentially agree that there was a fallback position, agree that they were modern buildings of no historic significance, and then went on to make the assessment between what was proposed and what was approved, and make that comparison to see if there was left, which is exactly what Jenna's report has done for you. So it's not something new for you to grapple with. We've been grappling with it for some time, and it has come forward, and we acknowledge that there was a conflict in terms of that policy, which is what's been written in the report and you've identified. However, there is, in this instance, there is a genuine fallback position that we are required to take account of in making that decision. So that's what we've hopefully laid out for you in the report.
Yes, I think government put local communities of rural areas in an impossible position with this policy. It is a bad policy, but unfortunately we've got it. It is doing enormous damage to rural countryside, and the floor is demolished there. But anyway, next speakers. Sorry. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Stark.
What was interesting, the report on the case law, is that the only instance of case law we've got in this area? And does the planning inspector normally fall on the side of the applicant when they have a class Q fallback?
I don't think we've tested it a huge amount here. This is where my major applications team leader thing falls down slightly, but it was based on a piece of case law from 2017 where it referred back to its genuine fallback position and being able to give that weight. It is something that we see. We have a lot of applications for class Q, and then we have some applications where we're relying on that fallback. And in some cases, it is genuinely a better thing than we had before. You know, we're uncomfortable with what you end up with sometimes in terms of what a building might propose to look like under class Q, but we don't have any control at that point. So my experience and understanding of it is yes, if there is a genuine position, then we have to take it into account, and that is the way that the inspectors have gone. But it is that genuine fallback which we have to take into account of.
The problem we have is most of the forward Dutch bound in the country. What I don't like, there's probably more to this. Do we know how many have actually gone back, these modern steel buildings, you know, not the Dutch bounds, have actually gone back to the fallback position as far as the cube box is concerned in the county?
No.
I know that particular position in planning, but I suspect that they're going to come back with an application for modern housing in London better on later date, but that's only matter of having got the cube planning in place as we see now. Right, I'll see this. Sorry,
Going back to the park chair and noting the comments from the parish council, could we lay down a condition to have a sustainable path that did link the actual development to the village, which would actually meet some of the objections from the parish council? Thank you.
Yeah, there is a condition requiring this path to be put in.
But could it be more substantial than what's actually proposed at the moment? I'm just thinking of sustainable development being active travel measures and encouraging people to walk and cycle, which is one of our policies.
Yeah, so this one is proposed, looks for the details to be submitted in respect of management maintenance and details of how that be provided, and the form between the site and the village. So that's
Can we put in a condition that made that possible, that the general public would be able to use it as well, or are we limited in what we can see there?
we're limited to what we've got agreement with at this time, so we'll make that decision based on, it's not a path that's being offered for adoption from the council, it's a path that's being offered, and that will be managed. How that's managed and maintained in the future is something that we've sought to secure through conditions, so we can ensure that.
But that's the most we can do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Are there any other speakers? Please, Councillor Thomas again.
Sorry, I'm going to come back.
All right.
One other thing, I looked at my notes and I haven't got my glasses on, so I forgot. the position, the barns are in a very high, that was there yesterday, they're in quite a high aspect, they're well above. If we're gonna pull them down, we're also gonna pull 2 Dutch barns down lower, closer to the road. I would have thought that these houses would have been far better if they'd been brought back, if we're going to allow it, brought back towards the road where they're not going to be quite as obvious, because in that position, they're going to be extremely high, well above the existing farmhouse. Another question I'm going to say is, I think a lot of us are not happy with this. I'm not happy personally with the design of the new ones. This is something that I think probably possibly needs sorting out. Mr. Chairman, are we able to ask for deferment so that it can be, or is this not possible? So that this can be, give the planners a little bit more opportunity to get a few more concessions out of it. And there's something which is a little closer to what the locals will find acceptable.
You could ask for it. I'm not sure quite what we've gained, but anyway, we'll see.
I think we need to identify, if that was the case, you need to identify what was your objections to it and what the harm was. And my first thing would be make a decision on what you've got before you. We've got the comments from Landscape, Heritage, Ecology, etc., that are raising their objections on those grounds, and it's been carefully considered through the process of this application and amended to reflect that area. Materials are conditioned on the application, so we can look at taking on board the comments in terms of the stone and other things as part of this shelter condition.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate what Councillor Thomas is saying. I can't support, unfortunately, I can't support a deferment. We have before us what we have before us, and we have to decide upon what we've got to decide. That's the way it works. Looking at the designs of the new builds, for want of a better word, I thought they were quite interesting. They weren't standard, bog standard square houses. They looked to be somehow different, and with a facing of local stone on them. I think they could look quite attractive. It's one of those subjective things, design, and I think we've got experts who make these decisions. There's all sorts of planning departments, statutory consultees, etc., who frankly are far more knowledgeable than we are. And I think we have to decide what we've got in front of us. The NDP business is a problem. It really is. I mean, what's the point of NDPs if we don't support them? But of course, we've got this Class Q business, which overrides the NDP's objections. And so it's tricky. I think a decent quality conversion of the old barns, plus a sensible rebuild of replacement, if you like, of these modern steel barns, I think is the best we're going to get. And I think once it's done, we might find that it was all worthwhile in the end. But, I mean, who knows, is it? We're asked to make these decisions based on what we're told, and I think we have to go with it. But my opinion is, I think it would be wrong to refuse it. It would definitely go to an appeal, and I think we would lose on appeal. And then with costs and all sorts of things, I think it's not worth the risk. I think we've got a decent development before us, and I think we should approve it.
Is that a proposal?
Yes.
Is that seconded?
I will second it.
Seconded. Right. Debate on that? None? Right. We go to a vote on it. So I go to the local member first of all. No, sorry, I go to the opposite, what's it saying? No. It's all been said.
Yeah.
Councillor Swindon.
I haven't been said. It's a very interesting conundrum, and it's been a very interesting debate. I think we just really explored this issue. I do very much agree with the chairman's comments about Class Q and the fact that it throws up these things. It shouldn't be used as leverage, in my view. I think that's not conducive to good planning or good place shaping. But I thank members for what has been a very thoughtful debate and await the outcome. Thank you.
Yes, and one of the things that it does do, we've put members in an impossible position because we're supposed to, do they, at the back of our minds is consideration of whether they would be due before back position, and most of us think not, but we're not allowed to consider that, whether the viability of that or not is the case. Anyway, right, we have a proposer and seconder. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation as outlined in those in favour, please show. Those against? Abstentions? That is carried, I believe. Yes. Right. 5 minutes demonstrating. Tell us otherwise. Next.
Just one moment, Mr. Chairman. And we're live again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can I welcome you back to the meeting following our adjournment? Can I request that public speakers present in person for the agenda tonight, item number 7, Mr. Mears and Mr. Robinson, please take their seats in the public participation tables at the front, please. Good morning. I welcome you to the meeting and will call you to speak following the officer's presentation. The officer for this is Ms. Smart, and she will now make her presentation. Thank you, Ms. Smart.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. So this application relates to a residential development of 25 dwellings on a site located in the village of Kimbolton. The red star on the slide to the right of me indicates the site. The application is before committee as a departure in terms of affordable housing, and as committee have previously resolved to permit this application, but for officers to finalise associated legal agreements based on the draft heads of terms previously provided. The site falls within the river leg catchment of the River Wye Special Area of Conservation. Since the application was previously considered by committee, the issue in respect of phosphate and nutrient neutrality has arisen. The permission could not be issued until a solution was found to achieve nutrient neutrality. A suitable mitigation strategy has now been achieved in order to achieve nutrient neutrality through the purchase of phosphate credits from the council. In terms of the application site, the village of Kimbolton is located approximately 2.5 miles east of Leominster. The village benefits from a pub, village hall and primary school, as shown in this slide. Next slide, please. Site is located on the northern side of the A4112 between two existing residential developments. Chestnut Avenue lies to the west and Stockton Rock to the east. As set out, the site falls within the river leg catchment of the River Wye Special Area of Conservation. It's in flood zone 1. Next slide, please. This slide shows some contextual images from Chestnut Avenue immediately west. Image 1 in the top left-hand corner of the screen is taken standing looking back towards the A4112 from Chestnut Avenue, positioned higher than the road. Image 2 is taken looking east towards the site of Chestnut Avenue immediately left, located on higher ground. And image 3 is a photograph showing the architectural style of dwellings in Chestnut Avenue. Next slide, please. The site's not within a conservation area or any designated landscape area. There are listed buildings in the vicinity as shown on this image. The closest is Stockton Cross Inn, which is a grade 2 listed building. Next slide, please. This slide shows Stockton Cross Inn and a view looking towards Stockton Cross Inn from the main road. As set out in the report, the proposal is not considered to harm designated heritage assets in the area. Next slide, please. This slide shows the site location plan submitted with the application. The site measures approximately 1.6 hectares. It's an irregularly shaped parcel of pasture land. The topography rises from the road. As set out, semi-detached residential development at Chestnut Avenue is located to the west and Stockton Rock to the east, which is separated by Ride Lane. Stockton Rock consists of a mixture of bungalows and two-storey properties. Steps Cottage is immediately southeast of the application site and the closest single residential plot located to the application site. Next slide, please. Site is recognised as a committed residential site in the main neighbourhood development plan. The red line of the application site reflects the site allocation, the site within the neighbourhood development plan in terms of a committed residential site. Next slide, please. This slide provides an indication of visibility display based on photographs showing broadly the location of the access. There are no highway objections to the proposed application, which remains consistent with that previously approved. Next slide, please. This slide provides some contextual photographs from within the site. Photograph 1 on the corner of the site near to Chestnut Avenue. Photograph 2 looking south from the northern corner of the site, and photograph 3 looking north with the gable of the property on Chestnut Avenue in view. And photograph 4 is taken looking north from the east from the existing field gate. Next slide, please. As has been set out in the report, the site has been subject to a number of planning applications. On April 29, 2016, outline planning permission was permitted, including access for a proposed residential development of 21 dwellings. This is application reference 151145. This slide provides a summary of the Section 106 requirements associated with that scheme, which included no on-site affordable housing contribution, and instead an off-site financial contribution for the delivery of affordable housing. A subsequent reserved matters was approved, but not before a 2016 reserved matters reference was refused by the LPA and dismissed at appeal. Reserved matters application 180323 was approved on 27th of March 2018. The approved layout is shown on this slide. To the right-hand side, to the left, we have the outline layout which was submitted. Next slide, please. On 22nd of August 2018, members considered the current planning application, so the 2018 planning reference, on the basis of the layout shown in this slide. The application was submitted following discussions between officers and the applicant to try and secure on-site affordable housing for the local community. In order to provide on-site affordable housing, additional housing units were proposed. The applicant had an implementable scheme which could effectively deliver no affordable housing on-site. Following these discussions, the applicant submitted the current application and included the provision of all on-site affordable housing units instead of an off-site financial contribution, which was considered of significant benefit. As noted in the committee report, at that time a fallback position existed which could be lawfully implemented. The application was taken to committee in 2018 with a resolution to permit, subject to finalising the Section 106 agreement. And as set out earlier in this presentation, following committee's resolution to permit the scheme, discussions took place between the applicant and officers to draft the legal agreement. However, prior to signing the legal agreement, the matter has arisen in terms of phosphate, and the application has since been placed on hold pending a suitable mitigation solution. Next slide, please. The application is now eligible to purchase phosphate credits to mitigate its impact and achieve nutrient neutrality. Officers have undertaken a review of the application in the context of the current planning policy context, given it's been on hold since 2019, and have sought amendment to the scheme based on the updated position in terms of Section 106 requirements. The position in terms of affordable housing has also been reviewed. There have been no changes in terms of the development plan context since the previous recommendation and committee resolution. As noted in the report, the previously approved application is no longer extant, which is noted as a material change in circumstance. The committee previously considered the application. The layout remains for 25 dwellings with only minor changes to the scheme based on housing tenure. Officers have also secured an additional 2 low-cost open market affordable housing units. This takes the total affordable housing percentage proposed to 24%, in contrast to the 16% which was previously accepted by committee. Next slide, please. It comprises a mixture of 2-storey and single-storey dwellings. This slide shows the architectural approach for the proposed dwellings, which comprise a mixture of brick and render and include traditional architectural details such as chimneys and timber porches. Next slide, please. A number of objections submitted raised concerns in terms of flooding and drainage issues in the area, and in particular surface water drainage issues. It's worth highlighting to members the applicant did make amendments to the FOWL proposals, including amendments to incorporate a drainage mound in an attempt to achieve nutrient neutrality in the period since the application was previously considered by committee. Subsequent reconsultation periods have taken place in respect of those amendments, and as such, some of the submitted representations do relate to previous strategies in terms of FOWL. Ultimately, this was not a solution to deal with the habitat regulations assessment issues in respect of the site, and therefore the applicant reverted back to the previous proposal in terms of FOWL. Kimbolton is not served by public sewers, and therefore a package treatment plant is proposed. A drainage strategy has also been submitted to deal with surface water drainage and updated since the previous committee. The drainage strategy has been amended to address concerns which have been raised, and the application now proposes to discharge treated foul and storm water to the Cogwell Brook at Lower Stockton. The local lead flood authority have been involved in discussions in respect of the application and raised no objection to the proposal, subject to the inclusion of conditions. The recommendation does include a condition requiring the applicant to undertake a CCTV and cleansing work survey on the existing drains to confirm their functionality, and if required, remedial works would need to be undertaken prior to occupation of the dwellings. Overall, the principle of the residential development is supported by the development plan. There are no technical objections to the proposal in terms of highways, flooding and drainage, ecology and heritage. The housing officer also does not object to the scheme and the affordable housing provision provided. A suitable mitigation has now been achieved in terms of the habitat regulations, and Natural England has confirmed it raises no objection. The applicant is required to make a payment to mitigate for the level of phosphate generated in respect of the proposals. Officer's recommendation remains consistent to the recommendation made to the committee in 2018, and that is to permit the application subject to conditions and on the basis of the updated draft heads of term, which are included within the committee report. Updated conditions have also been incorporated within the current recommendation to reflect updated drainage comments and to reflect the position of this now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And now I'll invite Mr. Mears on behalf of Kimbolton Parish Council. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, everybody. So just to clarify that the position of the Parish Council is that we are in favour of this development overall. What I would say, it's been quite a long drawn out process with lots of twists and turns on the way. What I would say, however, is we do welcome now the Heads of Terms 106 grant agreement coming forward to us. We did not categorically agree to the original sum of £270,000 being paid to the council outside of Kimbolton. So this is a significant scheme to our village. We are basically two small hamlets that join together, so 30 additional houses is a big thing for us. So with all these situations, there is a balance to be struck, and that balance is the 106 Head of Terms. So I'll read out the comments of the Parish Council. So we request that the Parish Council consulted directly regarding the allocation of section 106 grant money set aside specifically for the community of Kimbolton. Provision of traffic calming will be a priority. We request that this is written into the legal conditions of any planning approvals. We request that the 6 at-cost affordable homes, which was obviously previously 4, but is now 6, are offered strictly to local persons in the first instance with family or similar historical connection to the village. We request that this is written into the legal conditions of any planning approvals. The revised plans show a combination of brick and render finishes, which results in the scheme still being a little bland. I'd like to point out that Adam Lewis carried out quite a significant case study back in 2019, taking into consideration policy K7 of the Neighbourhood Development Plan. And I'll just reiterate one of those lines. It says that the properties need to incorporate locally distinctive features and materials. So I would question at this stage that the current finishes of brick and render are a little bit bland and a little bit budget-like in comparison to the other properties across the village. Surface water and treated sewage is to be directed in Cobble Brook, as we know, adjacent to Old Chapel House and 102 New Road. Although retention tanks are planned within the scheme, we suspect that the properties may still be affected against these 1 in 100 year events. We would like to point out it's absolutely critical that drainage is surveyed correctly and those connections are made with ample ranges of pipe work. Just one item to point out to you from the Heads of Terms 106 agreement, so this needs a little bit more work. Section sports contribution, notes about a financial contribution to various sports facilities to include Kimbolton School and New School Hall. The New School Hall was actually constructed about 5 years ago. So
I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to sort your points to 3 minutes. Sorry. Thank you. And now can I invite Mr. Robinson, the local resident, to speak in objection.
Good morning. The site is located at Stockton Rock, which indicates the impermeable nature of the bedrock. It is impossible to calculate the volume of water flowing from the higher land above the site down onto the A4 112 in storm conditions. Replacing pasture land with the drives and roads for 25 dwellings will lead to a massive increase in the historic flood level. These proposals do not provide adequate drainage with soakaway that could possibly handle storm conditions. The proposed foul drainage system requires great discipline and regular management to work effectively, and is only successful when installed as a single unit managed by a sole occupier. It would be irresponsible of this committee to allow the developers to install such a system to serve 25 dwellings. These are high-risk proposals. The safe alternative is to transfer both surface water and foul drainage by pipeline to land owned by the applicant's family to the west of the A49. This will allow space on the site for drainage ponds or holding tanks to retain surplus water in storm conditions. The pipeline to the A49 must be an absolute requirement of any approval. Furthermore, these proposals allow the applicants a 17% increase in their saleable properties. The number of units must be restricted to 21, including 4 affordable units and 2 low-cost bungalows for older residents. All of the trees on the edge of the site have their roots in the westerly bank of the ride track. There are no proposals to protect these trees nor the unstable bank from collapse, thereby cutting off access to homes that it serves. No work should start until adequate measures are put in place. The water supply to Rakefield Farm and Barn passes beneath the site, and no work should commence until the supply pipe is properly protected. Over 40 villagers objected to the earlier application, with only 3 supporters. At that meeting, the local councillor, who is not a villager, misled the committee by stating that opinion in the village was evenly divided, which was clearly not so. That councillor supported the applicant, a daughter of Lord Corley, so he should not be regarded as an independent member of Herefordshire Council. Committee members must now give serious consideration to the proper concerns of those who live in Kimbolton, rather than to further increase the wealth of the local agriculture that has no connection to our.
Right, if the speakers can please take their places back in the public gallery. Thank you. Right, the local member is Councillor Stone. I'm sure he'll read his notes from 2018. So you're writing them again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, my thanks to members of the committee who attended the site visit yesterday afternoon, and at least it didn't rain on this occasion. My thanks too to the case officer, Chloe Smart, for her presentation this morning. As has just been said, we've been here before. In December 2015, outline permission was given for the development of up to 21 dwellings in the field adjoining the A4112 and Chestnut Avenue. I still have my notes from that meeting, and also for the second meeting on August 22nd, 2018, when the application was for a revised development made in full as opposed to outline for 25 dwellings. This was a much more acceptable scheme for 21 open market dwellings together with 4 affordable dwellings. At one stage it looked as though Kimbolton had lost any possible affordable housing, but thanks to the efforts of the parish council and to Andrew Banks in particular, they put it back on track. Kimbolton Parish Council supported the 2018 application, and this was endorsed as part of the Kimbolton Neighbourhood Development Plan, which was supported in their local referendum. Since 2018, there has of course been the phosphate issue with the application site within the hydrological catchment of the River Lug. So progress was stalled for 4 years, as with many other planning applications in the north of the county. The phosphate issue and the consultation with Natural England are outlined in detail in the report, so I will not repeat them all. But as is stated on page 55 of the report, the Council's approach is to offer phosphate credits as they become available. Credits are now available for the application proposal, and on the basis of the mitigation provided, a positive appropriate assessment has now been completed by Natural England. Natural England agrees that with the appropriate nutrient neutrality in place, there are no adverse effects on the integrity of the River Wye special area of conservation. Much of the 2018 report remains relevant, though there are a number of amendments and additional representations received. The most significant change has been the applicant's agreement to increase the number of affordable houses from 4 to 6, even though the total number remains the same. The affordable housing element of 24% is not as high as originally proposed in 2015, but is a significant improvement. Kimbolton Parish Council requested that the affordable homes are offered strictly to local persons with family or similar historical connections to the village, and I agree. I'm pleased to say that it is stated on page 83 of the report, the affordable housing units are to be provided on site, offered to those with a local connection, and also comprise a small number of bungalows. This sounds good news. Two other specific requests were made by the Parish Council in their comments on page 79. They have asked to be directly consulted regarding the allocation of Section 106 monies set aside specifically for the community of Kimbolton, and I hope this will be agreed. Secondly, the drainage mound they were concerned about is no longer an issue. A new drainage scheme is explained in the report, and I draw members' attention to condition 9 on page 93. Drainage and flooding are among the main issues of concern raised during and since the 2023 consultation. 20 letters of representation have been received from 12 contributors. 12 of the contributors raised objections, including the impact of the proposals on the Cogwell Brook, bearing in mind that low-lying properties and gardens have flooded there in the past, especially along New Road. Highway safety is also highlighted as a major concern in the village. 25 more houses will generate extra traffic on the already very busy A4112. The speed of traffic, in spite of the 30-mile-an-hour limit, is frequently raised by residents. There is also no cycleway or footway between Chestnut Avenue and the A49. Provision of traffic calming is a priority for the Parish Council, and I hope and expect that this will be addressed, if the application is approved, in the transport contribution as part of the 106 agreement. The transport improvements could include any or all of the following: improving footpaths in the village, improved 30-mile-an-hour signage, maybe even a lower speed limit near the school, speed indicator devices, SIDs, which can be upgraded, cycleway link to the A49, features to reduce road traffic speeds to provide a safer environment for all pedestrians, cyclists and motorists. Parish Council should be involved in discussing all these proposals with the relevant officer. The draft 106 contributions are far more generous than before, including recycling provision, healthcare, public rights of way, sports contribution and education. Education was not included last time, as has been pointed out, but this time Kimbolton St James Primary School is very much included. However, I wish to raise one concern that's already been mentioned by the Vice Chairman of the Parish Council, that under sports contribution there is provision to provide a multi-use sports hall by the primary school. This hall has already been built and is in use. So instead of the monies being used at Bridge Street Sports Park, I would suggest that the pupils of Kimbolton should benefit with extra sporting facilities and equipment at the primary school. This will be good for health and well-being, so please can it be discussed as part of the Section 106 agreement. Two questions to ask the officer before I finish. Will there be electric charging points in new development, and provision for a cycle store? This may have been mentioned in the report, but I might have missed it. My final point is that this is the most significant planning application for many years in Kimbolton. It may not be perfect, and there are many aspects that I have not had time to cover, but the report is thorough and detailed. It's a far better application than the one which was first approved in 2015, all those years ago. But first, I'd like to hear the views of committee members. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Do you want to make a comment then?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Councillor Stone, just in response to the two questions you've asked, yes, I can confirm condition 14 requires details of secure and covered cycle storage for each of the dwellings to be submitted and agreed. And there is also sort of mentioned in the presentation in terms of updating the conditions from when the committee previously considered the application. Electric charging points is something that obviously has moved on significantly since then. So a condition's been added requiring details of the electric charging points on the site. And that is
16.
Thank you. 16.
Thank you very much.
Just quickly, we talked about the sexual ethics and obviously the matter that's been raised there, and we have arranged an initial meeting with the vice chair of the committee today as well, just to start that conversation. So it is something we're committed to do as well.
Okay, now I invite debate.
Chair.
Sorry, go on, Boo.
Yes.
Councillor Davis.
Well, having listened to it all, particularly the 106 money, I just think that this small place is going to benefit greatly from this 275k. It's actually going to come into village, compared to not actually not passing this application and no one's going to benefit. That was my thoughts. I do like the idea of having affordable houses. My question in my own mind was, how long are you going to leave these houses vacant until someone comes along in your village to actually buy them? Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Further, Councillor Baker? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was at that meeting in August 2018. My little trusty notebook, I've seen my notes. They're very limited notes because this was, I think, the second or third meeting we'd had. Unfortunately, my notebook only goes back as far as 2017. So I've got nothing. I think they've gone the way of all things, my original notes, but there we go. I was enthusiastic at the time and I remain enthusiastic about this application, especially the building of bungalows. I can't remember the last time planning committees actually approved or discussed bungalows, and it's really nice to see it. So I'm certainly enthusiastic about that. I think we could, I'm not sure about the conditions. Will they consider materials, building materials? The Vice Chairman of Bolton Parish Council made it quite clear that these are all very standard red brick faced. Maybe we could do something about that. Other developments, I think the one in Bodnam is a good example, where the frontages are of a different colour, which just is easier on the eye, doesn't make it look too much like an old-fashioned 1960s estate. I was also encouraged by the attendance here this morning of a local resident who's taken the trouble to come and address the committee. It's quite unusual. He talks a lot about flooding, but of course the flooding and drainage is well covered in this report by experts in the field. But I understand his concerns. What I was concerned about was his criticism of a councillor. It was unnamed. I just hope it wasn't John Stone. But anyway, this is not the place to be doing that. But that apart, I have no problem with this one and would recommend that we accept the officer's recommendation eventually of approval.
Thank you. Councillor Simons and Councillor Thomas.
Simmons, but better know. Fine. I too.
It's the side reading.
Hopefully not, yeah. I too support the principle of the development here in this location. It's on a bus route. It has access onto a road. The conditions, I believe, the drainage issues as part of SD3 in our policy, which should address runoff onto the A4112, which is a concern of the resident who's attended today. I am very pleased to see the improvement in the planning obligations secured from the developer, and particularly in relation to the affordable housing on site. Although it's not 40%, it's still an improvement. So that's to be welcomed from the case officer's work. So thank you. I do have some concerns about the hedgerow and boundary issues with the site. Within our core policy of LD1, LD2, LD3, LD2.2 and LD3.3 references connectivity to existing ecological highways and networks. There are 2 field entrances proposed either side on the north boundary of the site and on the southwestern boundary of the site for field access. That then basically cuts off the hedgerows and ecological improvements that are proposed at the northern boundary of the site from the rest of the wider ecological network, and therefore we're not supporting our core strategies in that element. I would particularly like to see the connectivity to the tree boundary along the sunken lane to the north-east of the site to be joined up with the hedgerows. I can't quite understand why there are 2 field accesses proposed into that site. We shouldn't be allowing heavy goods vehicles like tractors, etc., to come up through all the way through the development, and they can access the field on the left-hand boundary without going through and affecting perhaps children, etc., playing in the street up there. The other concern I have is the tree protection zone. Is there a construction environmental management plan proposed as part of the conditions that has a tree protection zone as part of LD1? That would be really important. And the other thing is there doesn't appear to be any renewable energy provision with these proposals. We shouldn't be building houses that have nothing like air source heat pumps, solar, etc., when we have declared a climate emergency. So that's something I would have preferred to have seen. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Councillor Thomas.
Well, first of all, the drainage. The gentleman from the village, but if you look at that field, the way it slopes, virtually every little bit of it slopes down to the road. So when we get a deluge of water, I can only see one place where it goes. And funny enough, I go on that road about once a month. And back in February, I think there was mud on the road there. So I suspect that water will flow down. This system hopefully will stop a great deal of that. I think it's a fantastic proposal. It's got affordable houses, it's got bungalows, as Councillor Baker said. I don't think you could get a better, and I wish a lot more that come in before us was designed like this. So I will be totally in favour of it.
Are there any other speakers? Did Councillor Baker propose this particular recommendation? I don't think he did, and there was a seconder as well.
Yes.
Are there any other speakers? Or Councillor
Simmons.
Simmons.
Just check that if we are putting a proposal forward that we're able to condition things like I've described with regard to hedgerows and elements there.
Yeah, so there is a construction management plan, construction environmental management plan, and a detailed landscape and ecological management plan for construction phases and a tree protection condition. On that, we have another further condition as well in terms of tree and hedge planting protection. We can explore whether or not there's an opportunity to do that in that detail, that's fine. We didn't have an answer to your question yesterday, and we haven't been able to get that as to why there's 2. There's always been 2 on the plans, so it's not, but we can explore that and see if there's an option to explore that. We're happy to take that away. There is opportunity in a condition to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly.
Can I just also have clarification on this particular map? As the entrance to the site, to the right as we're looking at it, where the current hedge is, I see it's excluded. There's a small area excluded from the planning application. I just want to know why, because there's a piece of hedge there that needs to be retained. But there's something,
Yeah, it's got a gate in.
where the proposed gate is, yes, between the current gate and the future gate.
I'm assuming it's in the highway extent, which is why it's not been included in their ownership.
Well, all land running road is in the ownership of the adjoining land.
Yeah, I think it's the bank, it's the highway bank that's in, there is a footpath and the bank and the hedge is in the application site.
Yeah, I think we need to be quite clear that that is not to be removed.
The bank. Or the
hedge.
We thought, there's a quite, sorry, there is a condition on proposed, a condition about the highway access. And so we've got a condition requiring further details or gradients, visibility survey, surface finishes, drainage details, and we can also include any hedgerow in that. We can in hedgerow planting to make it specific to the hedgerow management and maintenance in the future. We can include that along that frontage. It would be wise to do that anyway. Now you raise it.
Councillor Davis.
And also to take up Councillor Baker's idea of not having it looking like a 1960 estate, please.
Quite like 60s, I think.
Decent quality materials, I think,
Yes.
is what I was on about.
Yeah, in terms of the material, I just want to clarify that the policy content is the same as when the previous application was determined, with the previous recommendation and resolution. So there's been no change to our sort of policy in terms of design. And I think, I sort of set out in the presentation that, obviously the scheme is for 25, there are differences in terms of how applicants approach, based on the scale of proposals and based on the development that we are seeing in this application. You have got chimneys, you have got some of those traditional detailing and a good mix of materials, render to the bungalows and brick and render throughout the development. So I'm not sure, that's something that from an officer's perspective, given the policy context, that there doesn't sort of justification to push that forward beyond the previous approach in terms of materials.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you for the presentation, lovely, and the site visit was certainly well worthwhile. Are solar panels going to be offered to the purchasers of the properties? Would they be offered?
There's no specific proposals in terms of solar panels with the scheme. I think that would be, obviously we've included the electric vehicle charging condition. And that would be something as this for occupiers of development to determine whether or not they wanted to implement their own solar panel scheme at the site at their property.
I think it would probably be a good thing that it was offered. We bought a house 8 years ago. We're having solar panels put now. We weren't offered. You might have, you might say, well, we should have thought about it, but we didn't. And it would have been nice to have been offered.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's becoming more normal. I think it's becoming more normal for developers to make those offers. We certainly deal with applications for things like non-material amendments, etc., to change schemes to address those issues. I think this it's a bit stuck in it. It's been sitting in 2018, it hasn't been updated. But it's not to say that I think a lot of that side of things is now purchasers and required because they're looking for more energy efficient homes. So I don't know the answer for definite. We can raise the question. It might, and it's more normal than it's not. These solar panels on new builds developments. Quite often they don't show them on the plans. again, not necessarily not normal, but it is permitted development to erect the solar panels up there.
And I would assume some sales would be started off plan, wouldn't they? Some purchases would come forward.
Again, happy to raise it, take it away.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just quickly, so could that be written into a condition? Because having solar panels does require a material change to the property. If you want battery storage, that has to be taken into account as well.
We can look for we've done them before, we've done conditions where they provide like a response to sort of sustainability criteria of what they intend to put an offer into their property, so we could word a condition along that line. Again, quite often those statements come with the applications now, so we're slightly on the back foot, I guess. But yeah, we can certainly get that away and have a draft a condition or a sustainability statement, essentially, which is what they intend to do. I think with new building reg code taking as well, that will be an issue.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Any other? No. Then do you want any other summing up? We'll go back to Councillor Stone. Finally, someone.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And my thanks to all members of the committee for their contributions and some of the points that they raised, which I hope will be taken on board. I'm sure they will be, officers and hopefully by the applicants. I agree that keeping the hedgerow is very important. No trees should be lost as a result of this application. I think the case officer confirmed that yesterday. The resident who spoke this morning did raise an issue about trees along the ride footpath and the problems that they've caused in the past, particularly when branches come down blocking the road, meaning that a number of properties can't be reached. And this is an issue that's been taken up with the council on a number of occasions, but it does give an opportunity before this development starts for those trees to be looked at, see if that they're safe, because the roots do go out into that field. So I thank the resident for mentioning that point about the trees, the problems of trees in the ride. There was also a point made at the end about solar panels. Whether that can be agreed or not, I don't know, but we should be looking at all ways of promoting energy efficiency. But as I said earlier, Chairman, this is the most significant development for Kimbolton since the nearby Stockton Rock estate was built. It also represents a huge improvement compared with the earlier scheme. It's very similar to the August 2018 scheme approved by the Planning Committee following a full and proper consultation process and in line with the Kimbolton Neighbourhood Plan. So my thanks to the case officer and her colleagues for all the hard work they've carried out to reach this point today. Kimbolton is a popular village to live in. As was pointed out earlier, I don't live there myself, but I do regularly attend meetings and functions in the village. It's so near the A49 and Leominster and stands to benefit in many ways from this development if approved. The mix of 4-bedroom, 3- and 2-bedroom houses and bungalows is much more in keeping with the area than an executive type or 1960s type estate. Although numbers of properties increased from 21 in 2015 to 25, density remains low. So there is scope for gardens and space to breathe rather than little boxes. Kimbolton Primary School should benefit, and the Stockton Cross Inn, as well as the village hall and the many active local groups in the village. And the affordable houses will be an opportunity for local people who want to stay in or return to the village. So I agree with the officer's recommendation for approval, subject to a completion of a Section 106 agreement and also the conditions being met. Thank you all very much.
Right. We have a proposal with a proposer and a seconder. Can I ask for those in favour? I think that is unanimous. Right, thank you very much. We'll move on perhaps to crop officers. Couple of minutes.
This is fantastic.
Or Avon.
Amazon delivery.
Mr. Chairman, are you asking for a break or just a transition?
No, it's a transition. I think we got on rather better than.
Was that directed at?
Yeah.
Delete things.
No. They're conscious of
I'll even see it go down at the neck. Hey, George.
Right, if you could take your place, that is just a little minute. That's a very there. Can I now request that the public speakers for agenda item 7 join the meeting? Please can Dr. Bradley report into the Zoom meeting, and please can Mr. Broadstock take a seat in the public. Please take public seat.
My name mispronunciation pales in
Put it down to my country. Very welcome to the meeting. We'll call you when following the officer's presentation. Right. This is item 8, which is land adjacent to Warren Lane, Ashton's Crew, Ross-on-Wye, Herefordshire. I'll now hand over to our officer, Mr. Joshua Evans, to make his presentation. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you, Chair. Good morning and thank you, Chair. First, I wish to draw the attention of members to the update sheet presented in front of you today. Please note the inaccuracy at 6.10 of the report, which was the result of a formatting issue, and the updated condition 2, which now appears appropriate for all members. I wish to thank those members who attended site yesterday and who I hope this is useful. This application has been redirected by Councillor Raymer, the board councillor for Penyard Road, and the application is before you today as a result of high public interest. Next slide, please. The application relates to proposed high-road access onto Warren's Lane, Austin Crew. The application is a resubmission of a recently withdrawn application. Warren's Lane is an unclassified road and is within Flood Zone 1. The site has no natural designation. It is noted, however, that there is a general view towards Key View 7 of the app, which is identified in the Aston Ingham Neighbourhood Development Plan. Next slide, please. The proposed access would be 19 metres long and 6 metres wide, with the site sitting 1.5 metres above Warren's Lane. As shown in the bottom image, the site will be graded in order to form the access, at a grading not exceeding 1 to 12, in line with Highways comments. Next slide, please. Of particular reference to the assessment of this application, proposed access would result in the loss of around 40 metres of roadside hedge, but the landscaping scheme incorporates a total of 62 metres of new native species hedgerow to be planted. This would result in a net gain of 22 metres of hedgerow abutting the proposed new access in the longer term, and this will be secured by conditioning. Next slide, please. As noted earlier, the site has no local, no national designations, but does fall within the general direction of KU7 shown on screen. Owing to the relief of the site, which slopes to the northwest, the access will not be visible from the identified vantage point, and is noted that it has been built home visible from this vantage point. Whilst acknowledging a localised impact owing to the limited scale of development, the proposal is deemed to be acceptable from a landscape perspective. It is your officer's view the proposed access and hard planning area represents an acceptable and justifiable agricultural development within an area of open countryside. Furthermore, the proposal seeks to minimise the impact of the planting of additional hedgerow. Next slide, please. The access will be for the purposes of agriculture, so it will not result in a significant intensification. The applicant has supplied appropriate turning information, which is shown on screen. Further, to a question raised yesterday, the width of the unclassified road, Warren's Lane, varies between 2.7 metres and 3.2 metres adjacent to the proposed access. Next slide, please. The slide highlights the visibility from the access, demonstrating 80 metres of visibility to the north and south of the access. The area engineer has not objected to the proposed scheme. The aerial photo in the bottom corner of the screen shows the existing access points to the field through an area primarily used for the keeping of horses, and is the only access point for the site. Next slide, please. The site is located within open countryside with over 100 metres to the nearest dwelling. There are no concerns with regard to residential amenity. The site is adjacent to an area which has been identified with protected species. As such, it is reasonable to request biodiversity enhancement and restriction on lighting, which has been recommended within the report. To conclude, the proposal has been assessed against the adopted development plan and is concluded to be compliant, and as such, if the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to conditions stated within the report. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I now invite Dr. Bradley, who I believe is online, to speak? You have 3 minutes, Dr. Bradley. I'm afraid we've got no sound.
Can I ask her to unmute? Chairman, if you could ask her to unmute.
Unmute.
Can you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Good morning. I will focus on the country lanes that are the fundamental characteristic of Aston Cruise, surface water flooding, and an historical planning decision impacting this site. Aston Cruise is a small hamlet. At best, it doesn't exceed 20 households, and at a glance, it may appear a higgledy-piggledy community without a heart, but that is to overlook its lanes. Aston Cruise is the historical hub that united 6 of the surrounding villages, together with the cities of Gloucester and Hereford. The lanes are the reason why Aston Cruise was established. They are its essence, and this application poses a serious threat to them. It's proposed to insert a tarmac splay 80 metres wide, framing a tarmac drive of almost 20 metres at one of the narrowest, most sunken, steepest stretches of our lanes. The over-engineering of what is, after all, a farm gate is economically surprising and would fundamentally fracture the leading landscape characteristic of this community. I now turn to the next question of surface water and flooding risk. Environmental agency maps record existing surface water flows along Warren Lane. The planning officer described how ground levels on site make it, and I quote, difficult to determine further evidence, end of quote, of water flow from the field being considered here. This proposal to breach the hedge, disrupt existing levels, and insert a surprising area of tarmac with a gradient sloping towards the lane could be the evidence of water runoff the applicant has chosen not to look for and the planning officer has been unable to find. We already see flash flooding at the low point on Warren Lane immediately below this field, and we ask that the elevated risks are reflected in your decision. We also mention the failure to comply with the condition of retrospective planning permission, which has been outstanding since July of 2022. the permitted agricultural store still lacks the specified matte, dark-coloured external roof. So in summary, this unusual application is choosing to over-engineer the hard surfacing for a farm gate that is owned by a London-based architectural practice specialising in the development of homes in open countryside. It is turning a blind eye to risks that would exacerbate an existing flooding problem and, perhaps unwittingly, scar the essence of the Aston Cruise landscapes, its lanes. Thank you.
Thank you. And now can I invite Ms. Bullock to speak on behalf of the applicant. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Sarah Broadstock, an associate from Studio Bark. We are an architecture practice and we own the field and are the applicants for the Gateway proposal. This is a simple application for a 4.4 acre field which has an uncertain future and which can intermittently become landlocked in poor weather conditions. We do have an existing right of access, but the access route goes firstly across a residential driveway for Nest House, which would be negatively impacted by agricultural or storage vehicles driving over it on a wet day. Then across a paddock, small holding area with a gate at each end and often with animals in between that have a habit of escaping. And then finally across a sloped pasture field, also with a gate at each end and with animals. And it's that field which is particularly tricky in wet weather, and we've had a few vehicles stuck in it over the past few years. Furthermore, the existing access requires agricultural storage vehicles to come through the village and use the busy B4222 for access. Being a tight access very near a corner on that road could cause village traffic build-up, especially if larger agricultural vehicles are struggling to get in or out. Warren Lane only services a few buildings and is not heavily trafficked, so makes sense for occasional and relevant usage and will limit the impact on the village and the residential driveway and associated small holding of Nest House. The access is important for maintaining the field and the barn and accessing equipment and storage materials. We've been in discussion with regards to drainage and are happy to carry out relevant conditions, including the bunding, which are likely to recommend bunding and to minimise any additional outfall into the lane. And we've also carried out hedgerow surveys and have subsequently made compliant proposals to ensure that biodiversity is enhanced rather than harmed. I'd just like to clarify that we're not proposing tarmac, but rather hardcore, which is more permeable, and that it's not necessarily economically surprising to want to put a gateway in an agricultural field. That does make it much more usable. As a farmer's daughter, I know that well.
Mark have sent somebody to speak.
And so, yeah, we kindly ask that the gateway application be reviewed at face value against policy compliance, and that your votes not be swayed by conjecture.
Thank you. If you could just take your seat back in the public gallery. Public galleries, Right, the local member is Councillor Bramer. He has the right to speak at the beginning of the debate and at the end of the debate. He has no vote and he has 10 minutes. Okay. Up to 10 minutes, I have.
It's fair of you, Chairman. I think I will not take up all of that time.
And it's the community singing at the end.
Okay. Anyway, good morning, councillors. Most of you will know I'm Councillor Harry Bramer, and the one with one noticeable gap, represented Wetherlam and Penyard since 2003, almost 20 years. In that time, I've got to know many of the residents, and as you would think, many of them got to know me. The application to create a new permanent access in Warren Lane, Aston Cruise, has resulted in many of the local residents putting in objections to this council, and even Many of the residents have taken the trouble to make contact with myself to voice their objections in person this morning. Aston Cruise is a quiet backwater, and Warren Lane is a tiny little lane, as those on the site visit yesterday will have recognised. At its widest point, the lane is 9.5 feet, that's 2.9 metres in old money, new money, at the proposed entrance, 9.5 feet. This hardly seems wide enough to make it possible for an entrance turn for tractors. The parish council strongly objected to this application, which follows on from the retrospective application P221376F for the new barn itself. This retrospective application made it clear in that application in 2022, only a year ago, that no access or parking to the new barn would be required. The parish council, in their representations, asked what has changed to make it necessary now. I ask the same question to you today. The lane is, I have said, 2.9 metres, 9.5 feet wide at the proposed point of access, but the gradient is also very steep, as those who were there yesterday would have seen. The access track, as proposed, is a large area of sloping tarmac. But if it isn't tarmac, I believe that's what it says in the report. If it's not tarmac, it's a large sloping area, something like 100 square metres of hardcore required. That will further exacerbate the problems of flooding with runoff in this narrow lane, which at the foot of the lane is the notorious Ruggle Brook. For 20 years, I lived with Ruggle Brook passing through my grounds, and it happened to flood quite amiably for me, but for probably flooded 30% of the winter. It is also at the moment completely solidly flooded and has not been looked at, according to locals, for a long time, and I would suggest would flood for the normal amounts of rainfall. Newham point out, as the Newham Parish Council point out, that they've recently had approved and adopted the Neighbourhood Development Plan. In it, it states various policies. The policy AST 13, paragraph 6, is that surface water must be appropriately acceptably managed through sustainable drainage with no adverse impact on local water courses in respect of water quality, pollution, or soil erosion or flood risk. This application does not allow for this. Likewise, AST 12, paragraph 2, states that planning must demonstrate that traffic generated can safely be accommodated on local roads without undue safety consequences, including road widening or loss of hedgerows, or to encourage walkers or to discourage walkers and cyclists. The proposal fails this test as well. So they have a barn that's only allowed retrospectively, and now an entrance that supposedly they didn't need at that time, and the parish council are asking what is going to be asked for next. So, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to consider these points, and if you consider the views of the residents of this small corner of Herefordshire to have any views at all, I would ask you to turn down this application. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll invite debate. Councillor Fox.
Thank you for the presentation and the most interesting and worthwhile site visit. I'm guessing the ancient hedge has been in existence for hundreds of years, as well as the deep sunken road. I'm in favour of progress and progression, but question the need to interfere and remove a section of truly ancient hedgerows. A new hedge is only a token gesture to the value of an ancient hedge. We're all custodians, and to interfere with an ancient hedge ought only to be an absolute necessity. That's So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor. Sorry.
As members know, I had the unfortunate experience of driving down Warren Lane yesterday. I was quite tempted to continue, but I thought that would have created too many vacancies in the council. It's a very narrow lane. The hedges are very high, and I had great difficulty in a hatchback reversing back up the lane and staying on either side. I cannot imagine how a tractor turning into that lane caused damage to, as Councillor Foxton says, these very ancient hedgerows. I think there's safety issues, and I quite agree with Councillor Braemar, because we do get flooding from the Rudd Hall in Ross, but we do get, as we know, pluvial flooding, which is often caused by hard tarmac drives. That, on the whole, I just don't see how we can support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Thomas, then Councillor Simons.
Can I, is it possible to ask the officer, we had some pictures up there. Yeah. One of which showed the existing entrance. Is that possible to pull that back up? Because
yeah, it should be slide number 7.
Bear with me, sorry.
Okay, sorry, mate. While it comes up, Mr. Chairman, I'm tended to agree with both speakers we've heard so far. I thought I couldn't understand why we've been asked even to look at this. But since what we heard from Harry, but I also found somebody in the village last night, and I have on this one. There is an existing entrance which is adequate. It is a retired farmer, and I can't see any point in having. And I agree with Louis. That lane, even with this splay, is going to be unsuitable for a tractor to turn, even a smaller tractor. So, yeah.
Councillor Simons. Simons. 7 years of an incident.
I too was originally quite surprised as to why we were having to look at this site. I couldn't understand why we were being asked about a field gateway effectively, but having been to the site and reiterating the comments of my fellow councillors, it was clearly a the proposals, although they do increase for connectivity, which is of a concern, I do have concerns about surface runoff from that site onto that lane. And I cannot see how on earth, even with an extended splay, removing 80, 90 metres of hedgerow and changing the fundamental nature of that lane, you would still get a tractor up and down there without creating further damage at the top or the bottom. I don't think as councillors we should be in the business of where land has been divided up and parcelled with existing access arrangements, why we should be having to create additional access onto that site for those reasons. It's not a particularly large commercial site, so I don't see how occasional access over arrangements that have already been used can't continue to be used. So I can't support the officer's recommendation, unfortunately, on the basis of LD 3.3, LD 2.2.
Okay.
Oh, and possibly also AST 13 of the NDP in relation to surface water management.
Right. Was it Councillor Jenner and Councillor Baker, I think?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to the site visit yesterday, so I'm left with the report in front of me. And so I'm looking at this it's figure 1 on page 2 of the report, which shows you this access track that actually doesn't go anywhere. So I'm wondering what the purpose of this application is. Is there something devious going on.
You mustn't judge others by yours.
My previous employment. On that little plan, there's this rectangular building on the plan, which I assume is where this track is supposed to go, and servicing that building. And with this access track, if it was in place, is this little building at the end going to be turned into someone's house? I suppose someone devious, or more devious than me, might well suggest that. But I can't see the point of it. I really, looking at the report and the drawings and seeing those photographs, I actually can't see the point of it. What's it going to do, this access? Where's it going? I don't know. So the officer's report was quite concise, but I'm left with some confusion as to what we're trying to do here and what this application is going to result in. Everyone seems to be against this little bit of track, 90 metres long, going nowhere. Is it just to supervise or allow tractors to turn in and out, but they actually can't get up Warren Lane anyway? It's a very strange setup. So I'm in a bit of a quandary, actually, what to do with this one. Sorry to be confusing.
Yeah. Just one point of clarification. It was said earlier in the meeting that 4.5, I thought it was hectares. Yeah. 4.5 hectares, or 4.something hectares, as opposed to acres, which is, a substantial difference.
Yesterday it was mentioned.
It was hectares, yeah.
1.7 hectares.
We were told yesterday at the site, 4.5 hectares, but anyway, 4.5 acres. Yes, which reduces the need for this. I can understand the necessity when you've got an access that it's very, very inconvenient, but this is 4.5 acres, which is a very small plot in effect. I was very, very shocked when I saw the height of the adjoining and how deep the sunken lane was. I just don't know how you can do it, actually, to be frank. You'd have to remove a substantial amount of soil. I think it would have to be longer than it is now, because it would, I think you get an awful amount of pressure down on the road and the edges adjoining that particular access. But anyway, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. From the visit yesterday, and I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made already, it's quite a strange idea to have an access point of that very narrow lane. And the height of the hedge and the bank behind it would have to take a significant chunk out. I did notice yesterday there was an awful lot of wildlife activity in that hedgerow with burrows and other entranceways for small rodents and other creatures potentially. So I propose that we actually reject this request for an entranceway.
Second that.
Yes, and the other point I don't think anybody actually mentioned, it's going to cause damage to the hedge opposite. The turning in that narrow road will eventually take away the bank on the hedgerow.
The spoiler.
I avoided it.
Are there any other speakers? Can we just clarify on what grounds we are refusing this? Silence.
Just core strategy LD 3.3, connectivity of hedgerows, LD 2.2. Again, the issue of the hedgerows, connectivity, but it's an enhancement, and it hasn't been. It's breaking that connectivity despite the additional hedgerow. And also, I think from what other members have said, AST 13 from the neighbourhood development plan relating to surface water.
Yeah.
I think as well. I don't know if anyone wants to put in anything from MT1 in terms of access for safe highway safety. I don't know if that's a feasible one that you discussed. That wasn't something I brought up, but
I
it may
brought up safety.
Okay.
So.
Could
that help, Gary?
Yeah, so in terms of LD 3.2 and 3.3, yeah. So provision of on-site green infrastructure to enhance the network and integration with and connection to surrounding green infrastructure network that relates to the loss of the hedgerow. Listening to the debate as well, with that, the topography and the sort of nature of the lane in terms of sunken lane
Heritage.
and in terms of the character issue.
So LD4.
That's LD1.
LD1, okay. Sorry.
And then NT1. Obviously, we've got no highway objection. They showed us acting on that.
Yeah.
Is that more of an issue? From what you were talking about, was more of an issue on the impact on hedgerow and damage to
Safety as well.
safety.
Yeah, people using it as a walkway.
It's 13. Anyway.
I think I'm
So AS 13 we were talking about, is that
AST 13.
AST 13, sorry.
I think it was written out. Councillor Bramer, I think.
Arrow 6 of ISD 13.
Okay. Sorry, I had it open on my screen and I didn't. From everything in the Labour Plan Committee. Okay, so ASP 13.6 is service waters acceptably and appropriately managed with sustainable drainage with no adverse impact on local water courses in respect of water quality, flood risk, pollution or soil erosion. ASP 13 also talks about biodiversity impact on heritage assets or rights of way.
Which I think is probably more if the drainage expert hasn't said.
Okay, so ASP 13.6 in terms of surface water impact.
May I speak?
Well, yes, I mean, it wasn't my concern, but I think it was other concerns of members, if anyone wants to support that.
Yeah. Yes. I just wanted to say, I think AST 12, para 2 is also important, as it's exactly as it's written out in the report on para 148, on page 148. That, traffic it has to be safely accommodated. Traffic was generated without operational safety and environmental consequences, including widening or loss of hedgerows. I think that's quite important.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, are there any other issue points? No. Then we'll go to you, Mick. Any more comments? No.
Okay, do we should just clarify which policies we're referring to? So LB1, core strategy policies, LB1 in terms of character, LB3 in terms of connectivity, biodiversity impacts, policy LT1 in terms of highway safety of use, and ASTN of the neighbourhood plan, AST 13 in relation to surface water drainage, and AST 12 in respect of generation. Right.
Okay. Right. As there are no further speakers, we will go now to the local member who will sum up at the end.
Thank you, Chairman. As was already mentioned in this meeting, this is probably the smallest application of this committee we've ever seen, but it is the people acting a very valid reason to bring it because of the environmental impact in their village. I'm delighted with the mood of the meeting, and I would ask you, please, to remember that ancient hedge cannot be made ancient again after a bulldozer has taken it out. So I'd ask you to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we have a proposal and seconded.
Yeah.
Those in favour of the proposal as refuse. That is refuse as on the conditions as outlined. we're doing now, so we can move on fairly quickly. Sorry? Oh, yeah, we can change the,
Just 2 minutes.
it will take very well.
Yeah, a bit long.
You want to pause it for 2 minutes?
Just 2 minutes.
And we're live again, Mr. Chairman.
Right, welcome back to the meeting. Can we now move on to item 9? Ashmore House, Stoke Prior. That's a proposed single-storey garage including garden room and office. This is not as in the agenda because of redirection, it is because the item is from a member of staff application. We have no speakers so on this item. So can I ask the officer, Mr. Dyer, to make his presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This application here before members is presented to this committee as the applicant is related to an employee at the council, otherwise this would be dealt with as a delegated matter. The property is a detached dwelling located on the northern side of the C1112 at the centre of the village of Stoke Prior, Leicester, location shown by the red star. Next slide, please. The dwelling is sited within a large residential plot in the village in an area characterised by similar detached properties in the immediate vicinity. Next slide, please. Planning permission is sought for the erection of a single-storey garden room and office with connected garage/storage building. This proposal is a revision of a previously approved 2-storey garden room/office earlier this year. The building will be sited on the eastern elevation of the main dwelling, as seen on the slides. Next slide, please. The outbuilding would be approximately 93 metres square and with a 4 metre rib height, and all elements are proposed to be constructed in materials to match that of the existing dwelling. Next slide, please. The location of the proposed outbuilding is set back from the road and the closest neighbouring property located approximately 17 metres away from the proposed building. Given the existing boundary treatments and the distance from public roads and neighbours, the impact upon public and residential amenity as a result is considered minimal. It was raised by the parish council that there are currently no provisions for surface water runoff provided within the plans. As such, the inclusion of a pre-occupancy condition, the details of a wastewater and drainage management strategy to be approved in writing by the LPA is recommended in order to ensure that water quality targets and surface runoff are appropriately managed. Along with this, the parish council has also suggested a monitoring condition shows that building sold or rented, short or long term, separately from the host dwelling. This condition was attached to the previous permission as well, on the request of the planning committee in April. To conclude, the proposal has been assessed against the adopted development plan and is considered to comply. As such, the proposal is recommended for approval to the conditions detailed in your report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. Now we'll go to the look at there are no public speakers. We'll go to the local member. You have 10 minutes.
Right. I'll probably use all of that 10 minutes.
I'll have a little bit of discretion at the end if you want to go on.
It's not actually an employee, it's an employee's relative. I was going to say that we're obviously in that place, but obviously pay them too much. But anyway, as you've heard, there's no objections from the the group parish council. There's certainly no objections from me, and I would suggest that the members vote for approval.
Thank you. Now I invite debate. Councillor Davis.
Can I just ask, did you say 93 metres of floor space?
Yeah, you do.
So,
That was very big.
so how far is 93 metres from where I'm sitting now to that back wall?
That was 93 square meters.
All right.
That's a very large, that's a very large garden room.
It's a double garage as well.
Very
So
large.
where we are sitting now then? Sorry, so where we are sitting now, and the tape, is that how much we're talking about? Are we? Those of you.
It's about 180 square meters, I would calculate roughly.
This is?
Yeah, so a half the size of it.
Oh, not bad. I didn't think of that whole.
Well,
That's fair. Councillor Simons.
I think, given that the conditions specify no additional separate sale and no habitable use, then I have no problem supporting it. And I move that we accept the author's recommendation.
Yeah, well,
Was that second?
yeah.
Any other speakers? No, can we now have did you want to say officers? No, further. Can we move now to the vote? Those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you all for coming.